So BYU faculty, students, the RAA Fulton College of Engineering and Technology and the Wideman Centre for Global Leadership, many thanks for inviting me here to speak with you today. It is a privilege for me to be asked to come along here to speak at one of the top private universities in the world. And when I was a young guy growing up, I never envisaged a life that would have me being invited to come speak at an institute like this. And to speak to some of the finest young student engineers and technologists in the United States. So it's great to be here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my career journey to date. Okay, I suppose looking back, I can see the significant impact where I grew up. I grew up in a place called Galway in the west of Ireland on a small farm. And I think how I was raised certainly helped shape me into the type of person and into the type of business leader that I am today. I grew up in a small 50-acre holding where farming and Gaelic football were part of the fabric of life in that part of Ireland. The land I grew up on was never going to be enough to rear a family. So my father, he was a carpenter by trade. He travelled 40 miles to the city to work to supplement our family income. And so with our dad working in Galway, a lot of the farm work fell to the kids to do. And, the work was pretty manual in nature back then, tending the cows, the sheep, the potatoes, the vegetables, the fowl, the corn, the you name it. All those chores were part of everyday life. And I was the eldest, so most of the load fell on my shoulders. So I guess, back then I remember, cows had to be milked by hand and barns had to be cleaned out before I walked to school. That was a 4-mile walk to school, so to and from. So school was almost an oasis from those early morning, all those early morning chores. But I suppose back then I learned a work ethic that I think has stuck to me since. After my primary education, I won a scholarship to attend boarding school. And with all those children, growing up in the house, we had 5 kids, 2 parents, 2 grandparents. That was a pretty heavily populated house. So sending me to boarding school reduced the head count by 1, so it lightened the load a little bit at the house. And this is my boarding school. So I can tell you, as a 12-year-old, the first time I drove through the wrought iron gates and into the driveway leading up into this austere grey building that I realised was going to be my home for the next 5 years. That was a pretty daunting experience. But my parents knew that sending me away to boarding school, the strict discipline of a boarding school and away from the hustle and bustle of a farm would give me a better chance in life in terms of my education and being successful later on. Boarding school, it was for any youngster away from a close-knit family and community, it was at times lonely. I have 2 daughters myself, and they're in their teens, and I can tell you, sometimes I say to myself, I'd never send my kids to boarding school, although sometimes daughters in their teens can be quite moody. I see Jessica smiling here. Sometimes I feel like shipping them off to boarding school, but I suppose I don't really mean that. When I went to boarding school, they were more commonplace in Ireland, and it was a different era back then, and it made practical sense for our family, as I said. Boarding school, there was some bullying at boarding school. The food was certainly not hot cuisine. It was at best average. Discipline was strict, and the school bell governed your every move. You lived by that bell. It called you from your sleep in the morning. It called you to mass first thing in the morning in the school chapel. It called you for class. It called you for lunch. It called you for tea. It called you for dinner. It called you for sport. And it called you for evening prayer before you went to bed at night. So your life revolved around that bell. But the discipline of that way of life in boarding school has stayed with me to this day. And I like routine and structure in my life. Another big part of my life was sport. I played Gaelic football and hurling. I talked a little bit about it over breakfast to some of the guys here this morning. This is one of the sports I played. It's called hurling. And those sports, I can tell you, if you don't know what you're doing, they can be quite dangerous. You know, I've somebody, Greg might have asked me, well, did I ever get injured? Yes, I did. I've had nothing serious, thank God, but I have broken some bones along the way. But you know, playing those games instilled to me a sense of teamwork, a sense of achievement. You know, when you trained hard and put your all into the game and won. You know, you can't always win, of course, but I think sports certainly taught me many life lessons and lessons that I bring forward into my career. So what brings me for you here today? Well, let me start with the who. The who is Greg Warnick. I first met Greg last December, actually, when he was. I was spoken at a Stanford leadership program back in Medtronic in Galway that Greg was facilitating. So Greg must have liked what I said that day, because shortly afterwards he emailed me and asked me to come along to talk to this university. So it's all down to you, Greg, and thank you for the opportunity. Greg provided you with some background on me before at the outset, just a little bit more color on that. So Medtronic, I'm not going to go through all this, it's a very busy slide. The intent of the slide is to give you a sense. Medtronic, we're a medical solutions company. We help sick people get better. That's our job. On that slide are the disease states, the range of disease states that Medtronic operate across. The ones that are encircled are the disease states that I'm responsible for, manufacturing operations for. This is the total plant network that I'm responsible for. So the dark blue are the plants with Medtronic names over the doors that report into me. There are, I think, 9 in Europe, in the United States, and in Mexico. And the lighter blue are the contract manufacturers. These are companies, they're not Medtronic companies, but they're people, they're companies whose job is to contract manufacture for companies like us, like Medtronic. So I guess that's my world. That's what I'm responsible for. So that keeps me, as you can imagine, that keeps me quite busy. From time to time, when I get to talk to groups like, not as big as this, I don't know how many people are in the room, probably close to 1,000 people, but I do get to talk to people on leadership development programs at times. And I get asked, Gerry, what are the most important things in your mind for a leader to be strong at? It's a really good question. And in response, I speak to the key imperatives of leadership that I operate by, okay? Look, there are countless books and opinions out there about leadership. I have 3 principles. I'm not saying they're right. There are others, but these are my top 3 that I tend to operate by on a day-to-day basis. The first one is to first plan and then do. The second one is be present. And the third one is pick wisely, okay? And just for the next few moments, I'll just go into a little bit more detail on those 3 key principles of leadership that I hold dear, okay? So first plan, then do. Look, that's really about strategy and execution. You know, you need to figure out the right thing to do. That's strategic planning. And then you need to execute. You need to do it. That's the execution piece. Okay? We all know that planning, flawless planning, is impossible. We all know that sometimes plans do not go to plan. Unexpected events happen. The really strong leaders are the people who say, well, let me go back. Strong leaders are not people who say, look, I'll deliver. I will execute if my assumptions come in, if everything goes to plan. That's not strong leadership, because we know things don't go to plan. The really strong leaders are the ones who can figure a way out when the unexpected happens, when things don't go to plan. The really strong leaders are the ones who find a way through it or find a way around it and deliver on the expected outcome. They don't point to the plan's not going to plan as an excuse not for delivering. Let me give you an example from the past. This is a very clear, very vivid. It happened before your time, many of you in this room, but some of the gentlemen in the front seats probably remember it. Houston, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. In 1970, those words marked the start of a crisis that almost led to the loss of 3 United States astronauts in outer space. In the 4 days that followed, the world was transfixed as the crew of Apollo 13 fought the most incredible of odds to get their spacecraft home. But in the end, they did it. And to the outside, it looked like a stream of engineering miracles were being pulled off. As Mission Control identified and diagnosed and worked through life-threatening problem after life-threatening problem on the long journey back to Earth. But the crew in the spacecraft, these weren't miracles. This was execution at its best. This was teamwork at its best. The crew in the spacecraft and the hundreds of engineers and technicians and flight controllers back at Mission Control. Together, their original plans obviously burst apart, but together they figured out a way to deliver on the mission and get that spacecraft back to Earth. I remember a great line in the movie uttered by the flight director, Gene Kranz. He's played by the actor Ed Harris. Failure is not an option. That team never counted as failure. They never even thought about, well, our plans didn't work out, so that's an excuse for us not delivering. I think actually sometimes you should, I know we've got a lot of engineers and technologists. If you YouTube, failure is not an option, there's a clip there, and engineers love it, where it's a real stressful moment in Mission Control when they're figuring out how to try to get these guys back to Earth. Take a look at it sometime. Just type in failure is not an option. So that's the first one. First plan, then do. We all know that planning flawlessly is not possible, but executing flawlessly should be possible. The second one is be present. And look, this isn't just about showing up. That's not what I mean here. When I say be present, it's about just being conscious and aware of your presence. And when I talk about presence, I'm talking about how you behave, how you carry yourself, how you interact with people. I've two examples actually that I want to share with you from my career. One is about presence. One is at the very early stages of my career, and the other is more recent. Is it okay, Greg, if I move around? I like to move around, it helps me think better. But my very first experience on the jobs market, I was probably the same age as many of you in this room. Okay, I applied for an internship at a company in Galway. Okay, so my first interview ever. I showed up, I go in the lobby, and this plant is run by an elderly, very sophisticated English gentleman. Okay, so I go into the lobby, this tall, well-dressed gentleman comes out with a three-piece suit, tweed suit, a pocket watch in the waistcoat. His name was Mr. Brown. Nobody knew his first name. Everybody knew him as Mr. Brown. Okay? So he goes in a very posh English accent. He goes, "Hello, you're here for an interview, correct?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Before we start," he said, "I'm expecting a delivery. There's a truck out back, or there should be a truck out back. Would you be a jolly good chap and pop around and see is it here?" So I think, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but I go outside, I go around the back, but there's no truck. So I go around the other side of the building, there's still no truck. So I go back and I report on my finding or non-finding, and we proceed into the interview room. About halfway through the interview, Mr. Brown said to me, he said, "There was no truck. I wasn't expecting a delivery. I was testing you to see how fast you moved." And he said, "The reason we're still talking is because you passed that test." So that, as I was preparing for this, I realized, that probably was a milestone moment in my career, because I ended up getting the job, and that job set me up for my next job, and so on. So, it's probably not stretching it to say that I may not be here today if I hadn't passed that go check on the truck test. The point I'm making here is I was being monitored, and I didn't realize I was being monitored. And as you go through life and as you go through your career, people watch you. They're watching you, and they're watching for how you behave, and they're also watching for how you interface and interact with others. Okay? So that's an example from my very early stages. But awareness and presence is not just about managing up, impressing the people above you. It's about how you interact with people at all levels. You know, people, when you're a leader, people, as I said, they watch you, they take their cues from you, they listen to what you say, they're watching to what you do, they're looking out for how you behave. So it's really, really important. I just want to give you a more recent example. Last year, excuse me a minute. Last year I hold quarterly staff reviews with my team. And usually at those staff reviews, we devote some time to talent, where we talk about our people in our organization. We're doing a talent session. And I asked about one of the people on the org chart. His name was Steve. And I'd been hearing all along about Steve that he was a poor performer, that we shouldn't be in our organization, but nobody had done anything about him. So I probed a little bit more about Steve. And as I probed, I realized Steve wasn't the problem. How Steve was being managed was the problem. He was reporting into somebody for whom Steve's work had no relevance. His boss wasn't being measured on what Steve did. Steve worked from home 5 days a week. His boss had no clue what he was doing. They had minimal contact. So this was really not set up for success. So we agreed that day to take action. We decided to put Steve reporting to a new boss for whom what Steve was doing was more relevant. We set it up so that he came to the office 3 days a week and he worked from home the other 2. His boss had weekly check-ins with him. He became a member of his boss's broader team. So anyway, 2 months later, I was at the site where Steve works, and I was talking to someone in the corridor one day, and Steve walks by. And I was interested to see how he was doing, so I turned around and said, "Hi, Steve, how are you doing? I hear you moved to a new part of the organization. How's that working out for you?" So we talked for a few minutes, and we went our separate ways, and I forgot about it. Next day, Steve's boss came to me. He said, "Gerry, I heard you bumped into Steve yesterday." And I said, "Yeah, I did." So he said, "Wow." He said, "Steve came to me. He said, I met Gerry yesterday. He knew my name. He knew I'd moved to a new part of the organization. He knew I had a new boss. I didn't even think he knew I existed." So here was a conversation in a corridor that I had, casual conversation in a corridor that probably I didn't think too much about afterwards, but it meant so much to Steve. And it was a very simple example to me of what leadership presence really means. So, regarding presence, no matter what stage you're at in your career, or no matter what you do in life, just be aware, number one, that you're monitored. You're being monitored by people. And number two, be aware of the huge impact and how you interact with people can have on others. Wrapped up in this message around being present is the importance of showing people you care. And so I have a question for you here in the audience, to test. What are the most important words a person can hear from you? The most impactful words that resonate with somebody. What's your name? Aidan. Aidan is right. Their name. By simply calling somebody by their name, you're delivering a very powerful message to them. You're showing them that you're important to them. And too many times I've seen people where they just don't take the time to call somebody by their name. So Aidan, top marks for you on getting that right. So my advice for you students here today is, while technical expertise in your chosen field is vitally important, don't get me wrong, but the importance of don't underestimate the importance of human interactions and behaviors and relationships. The importance of presence and being present. Okay? My third principle is about pick wisely. Have people heard of Jim Collins? He's a well-known business author. Jim says, people are not your most important asset. We often hear that, people are your most important asset. He says, no, people are not your most important asset. The right people are. You know the expression, choose your words wisely. Well, likewise, you should choose your teams wisely and surround yourself with the right kind of people. And I just want to give you an example again from my own career. Back in 2000, I was asked to take on an assignment at one of our plants. I was back in Galway. I was asked to take on an assignment at one of our plants here in California who were having serious operations issues. We had a new product in a new therapy area. No other company had this product, treating a very, very serious disease, where the only way of treating that disease was to crack open the chest and carry out very, very severe surgery. This was a new product which avoided all that. A fantastic new product, but the process was unstable, the manufacturing process was unstable. We could not manufacture the product in the quantity and of the quality that, as a company, we demand of ourselves. Okay? So we decided to stop shipping the product, because obviously quality comes first. This is a serious issue. Obviously, as I said, it was, every unit we could make, we could sell, and then some. Sales were booming, but quality came first. But it was a serious issue for the company. So, at my base back in Galway, Ireland, I'd been hearing about this issue for a couple of months, but to be honest, I wasn't paying that much attention. It was an issue in another plant 5,000 miles away. I had recently been promoted to director of one of the plants in Ireland, so I wasn't paying much attention to it. Until one day in August, my then boss in Galway called me over. He said, "Gerry, I'm after getting a call from the president of the division. He wants you to step out of your job here and relocate on assignment to the US to head up operations at this plant and fix the problem, stabilize the process, get the product back on the market." So I'm like, this nearly knocked me over. Because I'd been hearing about this issue that had been going on forever, and I was like, how do you expect me to be able to fix it? I asked, well, how long will it take? He said, I'm not going to kid you, it could take 4 months, it could take 6 months, it could take 8 months, it could take a year. We want you to go there and stay there as long as it takes to stabilize the process, get the product relaunched, hire your successor, and train that person. That was the ask. And he said, look, this isn't an easy one. He said, think of the biggest problem you've faced in your career so far, multiplied by 10, and you're still not even close. So think of that. I've got a wife and 2 small kids. There were 4 and 1. I've been just moved into this new job in Galway that was taking up all my attention, and this request comes through. So, I shared some of my thoughts. My boss said, look, countless people have tried to solve this. How do you think I'm going to solve it? So I felt that I was almost like, the image kept going through my head of a ship going down, that, this ship is going down, I'm going to go down with it. I'm serious. He said, look, he saw that I was I'd worked myself into a pretty bad state. He said, look, just go home and think about it, and we'll talk tomorrow. I remember, consumed me for the rest of the day and night. I remember getting up at 3 a.m., sitting in the dark in my kitchen, drinking tea. And all sorts of thoughts going through my head. So the next day, I was hoping I'd wake up and this was going to be a bad dream. But I didn't. So the next day, I talked to my boss again, and I was in a turmoil, and I explained it to him. He said, look, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Why don't you go and spend a week there and evaluate the situation, and then make a decision. Okay? But you guys know, Greg, you worked in industry, once I stepped on that plane, the die was cast. To go check it out. There was no going back. So, that situation brought to mind for me the Uncle Sam image, of your country needing you. But instead of your country needing you, this was my company needed me. This was my company needed me moment. And really, I did feel like I was stuck in a no-win situation. It seemed to me like I was being asked to do something I was going to fail at. So if I said yes, I was doomed. But if I said no when my company needed me, I'm also doomed. So as I said, felt like I was in a no-win situation. I said, I had 2 daughters at home, age 4 and 1 at the time. My wife was working. It wasn't going to be practical for them to come with me because I was going to be working 24/7 to try and get the problem solved with the seriousness of the situation I was landed in. So anyway, with much hesitation, and I got on the plane and went over to check it out. So on day 1, I met Stella. Stella was the production manager at the plant. So, after the usual introductions, I say, look, take me on a tour, Stella. Take me through manufacturing. So she takes me into the manufacturing area, and she takes me through the process. We start at the start and we go through it work step by work step. I usually use a chair as a prop for what I'm going to tell you here, but I won't bother here because it's on camera. But we get to the end of the manufacturing process. There's a sophisticated piece of equipment used to check for. It's an inspection machine to check for defects. Okay, so we've all the work put in, and this is a high cost product. It's the very last work step before we package it up. So there's a guy sitting on a chair with his arms folded, and he's sitting back pretty relaxed, legs spread out and laying back on the chair, and he's looking at the screen. And beside him, there's a big container with the words scrap written on the side. And it's full of product. There must be hundreds of thousands of dollars of value of product in that bin. So Stella introduced the guy in the chair to me as Mike. So I say, hello, hi, Mike. I said, the bin full of scrap grabbed my attention immediately. So I said to Mike, I said, Mike, wow, what's all this? He kept looking, he had never looked back at me. He said, scrap. I said, okay, but what's wrong with it? Why is it scrap? Again, he never looked back, and he goes, I don't know. It happened on the last shift. It's nothing to do with me. So I figured I wasn't going to find out much more from Mike, so Stella and I moved on, but when we got out of earshot, I said, Stella, it's no wonder this business is such a mess, or this plant is in such a mess, if that's the attitude of one of your production operators. And Stella got all red, and she said, Gerry, that's not an operator. That's our principal engineer. So when I finished the tour, I went back to the office and I called my boss back in Galway. I said, if I take this on, do I have complete autonomy in terms of the type of people I have on my team? Do I have complete autonomy in terms of hiring and firing? And he said, absolutely. So all I'll say is, Mike wasn't at work the next day. So look, Jim Collins talks about, people not being your most important asset, the right people being your most important asset. Clearly, Mike, that story, it's a true story, but it's a very extreme example of the wrong person for your team. Mike was the wrong type of person for the mission we were about to embark on, which was to salvage the product and the plant and the jobs of all the employees, all 300 people at the plant. So, Mike may have been a very good engineer. I don't know. But his attitude stunk. And this was too serious, and we needed to act too fast to figure out whether we could change him. We needed to get the right people on the team. I needed to make that tough decision, but it wasn't really a tough decision. It was the right decision for the patients we were serving who couldn't get access to our therapy, for the business, for the employees at the plant, and for myself, to make a statement from day one. So my message to all of you and to aspiring leaders is, surround yourself with the right people, hold them accountable, show them you care, and the results will follow. Surround yourself with the right people, hold them accountable, show them you care, and the results will follow. Actually, as I thought about this, this real-life experience while preparing for today, there are probably two themes embedded in it. The first one is about getting the right people. That's the Mike story. But the second one is about unexpected opportunity presenting itself and how you deal with it. Okay? My US assignment came completely out of left field. I wasn't expecting it. As I said to you, all sorts of doomsday situations were going through my head. But let me tell you how it all played out. The assignment was a success. We stabilized the process. We relaunched the product. I recruited and onboarded my successor, and I returned to Ireland about 7 months later. Mission accomplished. Somehow, personally, I made it work. I got to go home for long weekends every 4 or 5 weeks. My family came out to join with me 5 weeks in the middle of the assignment. And since then, that business has gone from strength to strength. It's one of the fastest growing franchises within Medtronic. And for me personally, that experience, it set me up for further leadership opportunities. I had, against my own will, I had been forced to step out of my comfort zone and test myself in a new environment and thankfully prove myself. So, you know, I didn't realize that at the time when I was making the decision, although I didn't really make the decision. As I said, when my company needed me call came, I felt there was only one decision that I could make. Yes, there was sacrifice, but when I look back on my career so far, that was a truly pivotal landmark in my career in terms of that assignment. Okay, so I share that story with you because I've no doubt, I don't know how many people in the room today, maybe almost 1,000 people. There are people in this room today, you're going to be faced with this scenario at some stage in your career. It could be you, Aidan. It could be you, Jessica. It could be any one of you. That moment will come. And how you react to it and the choice you make will have a huge bearing on the rest of your career. So at this time, I just maybe tell you a little bit more about Medtronic. Like many companies, many great companies that started out small, it had humble beginnings. It started out in a garage in Minneapolis. The company was founded by a man called Earl Bakken. He's an elderly man now, but he lives in Hawaii, and his brother-in-law Palmer Hermansley. Unfortunately, Palmer died in an aircraft accident not long after founding the company. Earl Bakken was an electrical engineer. He had a PhD in electrical engineering. He was fascinated by electricity. They set up the company to start repairing medical equipment in the Minnesota region. And Earl got to know a lot of physicians in the region and cardiologists. One of the cardiologists he got to know was a cardiologist called Dr. C. Walt Lillehei, and he was a cardiac surgeon. And as part of his job, he used to carry out surgery on babies who would be born with congenital heart defects. And after that type of surgery on a baby, those tiny hearts are not able to beat themselves for the first few days after surgery. So the babies are hooked up to pacemaker, which back then, in the 1950s, pacemakers looked like this. They're about the size of your average washing machine, domestic washing machine. They were big bulky boxes that they were wheeled around on carts, and for power that had to be plugged into the wall socket. Anyone, any idea? So after that surgery, those babies would be hooked up to those pacemakers. Anyone see any problems down the line? Any guesses? Power outage, you got it. On November 1st, 1957, there was a severe thunder and lightning storm in Minneapolis, and there was a power outage, and Dr. Lillehei lost a baby. And he called Earl, and he said, Earl, I can't never let this happen again. So Earl went back to his garage. He remembered a schematic he had seen in Popular Electronics magazine for a metronome, which is used to control the beat of music. And he got the idea around using this to control the beating of the heart. And in his garage, he built, with his own bare hands, the world's first battery-operated, transistorized, wearable pacemaker. Okay? So that was the moment when Medtronic transitioned from being just a repairer of medical equipment to a manufacturer, designer and manufacturer of medical equipment. The pacemaker is noted, I've seen it somewhere before, as one of the top 20 inventions of the last century. So Medtronic today has obviously grown a lot since then. Actually, if I was standing here a year ago, I'd have said Medtronic is a $16 billion company with 45,000 employees. Since then, in January, Medtronic completed the biggest acquisition ever in the medical technology space. We acquired a company about the same size as a company called Covidien. So today, essentially over the past 12 months, Medtronic has doubled in size. Our revenues are up close to $30 billion. I haven't seen the most recent numbers. And instead of 45,000 employees, we now have 90,000 employees worldwide. So we are by far the largest medical solutions company in the world. So, two companies coming together like that, two big companies with their own cultures and their own way of doing things, it's important to have a common set of principles that we all work off. So we've recently rolled out our new leadership expectations. And again, I'm not going to go through all this. So we recognize that leadership is demonstrated differently at different levels of the organization. But really what we're looking for is everyday leadership from everybody in the company, not just people with manager or VP or director in their title. Okay? And that's what this sets out here. It's really about, there are only 4 of them: shape, engage, innovate, and achieve. It's about being committed to being experts in what we do, partnering and collaborating with others, being bold thinkers and creating new ideas for our patients and customers, and the last one is achieve, or that's execution, doing what we say we're going to do. Okay? So these are just currently being rolled out across Medtronic. I watched a TED Talk recently from a guy called Drew Dudley. He's a university lecturer on leadership. And it's one of the most viewed TED Talks of all times. He talks about the notion of everyday leadership. And he suggests actually that we have made leadership into something that's much bigger than us. We've made it into something that's beyond us. We've made it about changing the world. We've built it into something so big that it's an excuse for us not to expect it of ourselves. He's almost suggesting we've made leadership into this unattainable monster that doesn't apply to most people. And he redefines leadership into something much simpler, into everyday moments where you can positively impact on somebody's life. Let me give you a great example of this. And it's something that the penny dropped for me on this a couple of weeks ago. I was back in Galway. I was heading to the cafeteria. And there's a long corridor, Greg knows, he was there last December, leading to the cafeteria. And a lot of people come over and back to their offices with coffee and whatever. There were about 10 or 15 people in 1s and 2s on their way to the cafeteria in front of me. Okay, I was coming behind them from way back. Anyway, I was just watching ahead, and I saw a young girl. She was towards the back of the 10 or 15. She stopped. Her name was Judith. She's an engineer that we recruited in the last 12 months. She stopped and she looked down, and I was still walking towards, and she took out her phone and she made a call, and I was going, what's going on here? And by the time I got, she got off the phone, and I said, how are you, Judith? She said, yeah, Gerry. She said, she got kind of nervous. She said, there was a coffee spill here. So, and it could be, somebody could slip on that. So I just called the facilities department. They're sending somebody over to clean it up, and I'm just going to stay here till they come. So 10 or 12 people had walked over that or walked around it and kept going. This one person stopped and took ownership. That was a great example to me of everyday leadership. She took ownership for this. It was great character because, she didn't know what was coming behind her. I walk fast. That was a lesson from my Mr. Brown days when I did that interview. So she didn't know what was coming behind her. She wasn't trying to impress me. Character is about doing the right thing when nobody's looking. So that's what we're trying to capture here in our leadership expectations, that it applies to everybody, not just the Gerry Kilcomminses or not just the production managers. Everybody owns leadership. On the general subject of leadership, I sometimes get asked, Gerry, are great leaders born or made? And as I think of this question, it reminds me actually of a story I once heard about a touring party, a tour bus or tour group that were touring in the west of Ireland, which is beautiful with mountains and lakes and very rugged natural landscape. And one evening the tour bus pulls into this little village, and they go into this old bar, and there's an old man sitting in the corner, obviously local. And as the tour guide is talking to the tourists about the village, one of the tourists moves over near the old man. He says, were any famous people born here? And the old man thinks for a moment, and he turns around and he said, no, just babies. So, are great leaders born or made? I firmly believe that it's the latter. I believe that leadership development is a process. I'm an engineer. I love process. And there's no doubt in my mind leadership development is a process of learning and growth. Sure, there are certain natural traits that people are born with that may form pieces of the overall leadership jigsaw, but in the main, leaders develop through the environment they're in, the experiences they get, and most importantly, how they use those experiences. So, as I said, leadership is a process of learning and application. Finally, another core driver of my business life, I want to share with you. Harvard You may have heard of it. It's a small, little-known university somewhere there on the East Coast. They did a study that spanned 75 years on the secret to living a happy life. And one of those findings was that having a meaningful connection to the type of work we do is a major component of that in terms of happiness in your life. You know, if you're passionate about what you do, you're going to think about it even when you're not working. And that gives you an advantage. So look, loving what you do is more important than achieving what we see as traditional success. Careers are not just about money and status. Once you earn a fair salary, it becomes much more than that. So whenever I am feeling the heavy load of work, and I do, trust me, I do, you know, I think of the patients that we serve. This year alone, at the end of this year, 62 million patients will have been treated by Medtronic products and therapies, made up of fathers and mothers and sons and daughters and students and ops dudes like me and university lecturers. 62 million. People will be alive or living a better life because of what we do at Medtronic. So that's what makes me proud to wear the Medtronic badge. When I think about the patients and their families that have had their lives improved or saved by our products and therapies. Finally, before I go to that, just on that, let me share something with you.
I mean, I've always felt like I was healthy, but when I found out that I had cancer, I didn't know what I'd be able to accomplish later, if anything. I didn't know if I'd even survive it.
Ruby's a very bright little girl, very intelligent. Ruby's developed scoliosis, means that she hasn't got enough muscle strength to hold her spine straight.
My heart just hurt. It felt like pins and needles in the heart, not the good pins and needles.
The stroke was there. I was completely paralyzed on the right side. There was a 95% chance that I wouldn't walk again.
Então, primeira coisa, pegou o braço direito. Aí pegou a perna, o pescoço.
I was diagnosed with scoliosis at age 11. At that point, I was a top state swimmer in Connecticut. I had to quit swimming. I was in a pain all the time.
Even though diabetes never got in the way of me feeling like I could do things that my siblings and my peers were doing, it really did affect how I felt.
He wasn't walking as nicely as he always was. I performed an MRI scan where he was diagnosed with Leig's disease. He was diagnosed in May last year. In September, he just stopped breathing.
Fear and shock engulfed me. I had to be very careful not to bruise badly because I could bleed out.
To me, after being so active, really wasn't worth living, to live under those conditions.
After I started the pump, it was very life-changing for me.
2 stents were placed in my heart. This enabled me to work more energetically.
To find out that there was a procedure that could stop that, I am so grateful.
Kind of music to any 11-year-old's ears when they no longer have to give themselves 8 shots a day.
It was the best thing that we had ever done. By a month post-op, I was feeling fantastic.
I want the word to be out among the medical community about what Solitaire is and what it can do.
I have a pacemaker. It just feels normal.
Então, depois que eu fiz a cirurgia do DBS, mudou praticamente tudo na minha vida.
I just didn't have any of the fatigue or anything that was going on, and I had it done on a Thursday, and I refereed soccer indoor on Saturday.
We placed him on the home care vent. He calls it his spooky, so he's named his little ventilator, and now he's happily at home and doing very, very well.
Me colocaron el neuroestimulador hace 2 años y volví a vivir.
To this day, I keep running my fingers over where the loop is. I can't believe how your device helped save my life.
The technology has been such a life-changing piece for me. It really makes day-to-day living so much easier.
Ich fühle mich sehr gut jetzt. Mein Blutdruck ist einwandfrei und ich kann wieder die Treppen steigen, was ich früher nicht konnte. Also luftmäßig war sehr schlecht, aber jetzt geht's wieder ganz gut.
Gut.
Ja, wir sind zufrieden.
It'll be a much easier recovery. Things could have been different for me.
Before, I couldn't hold my head and I couldn't balance. I needed someone to hold me. But now I can just hold my head normally and balance.
So, in preparation for today, I thought about what's my big close going to be, and I put a lot of thought into that. But I don't need a big close. There's nothing as big or as powerful as what you've seen just there. And as I mentioned, 62 million people per annum. So, since Greg introduced me 40 minutes or so ago, about 5,000 people around the world have been saved or improved by Medtronic product or therapy. That's my heartfelt connection to what I do, and that's what drives me, and that's what motivates me. So finally, I say to you, I chose the title I chose today was Leading from Within. And my encouragement to you, all you here in the room today, think about that heartfelt connection for what you do. Not just your technical connection. I'm sure you're all going to go on to be brilliant engineers and technologists. But I encourage you to reflect on that heartfelt connection to what you do, and to reflect on what leading from within means to each and every one of you. So I wish you very successful and fulfilling careers, and I thank you for your attention.